Brody, the defense. Dave Aranda is gone, as you may have heard. I saw him shaking hands with Mo Hampton and at the Houston College Classic with the
old pals.
Old pals, man.
Yeah.
You know, he was critical to the 3 safety look late in the season. Critical.
I mean, he literally allowed Grant Delpit to be healthy, so yeah, he owes him.
He owes him, but Bo Pelini is now the defensive coordinator on this team. It seems like, well, in your mind, Ed Orgeron has said that LSU is going from a 3-4 to a 4-3 front. How big of a change is this, and how well does their personnel up front? Because in my mind, the D-line is probably the deepest part of this defense. How well suited are they for that change?
Yeah, and everyone always asks like, what's the biggest storyline going into spring? And Miles Brennan's always the question you get first. But I think I'm fascinated most by this change to a 4-3, just because. And I'm not going to pretend I'm more privy than I am, but I mean, I just think there's so much unknown going on with here, and that who's a linebacker in the scheme, who's a defensive lineman in this scheme. We're starting to get some answers, but they're we don't have them all yet. We'll have some more tomorrow. But to answer your first question, the defensive line is obviously. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say it's the strength of this football team, not a receiver probably, and it's the idea that a Neil Farrell might be a backup again in this defensive line. So, okay, I mean, sometimes we overthink the change from the 3-4 to the 4-3, and it's that the roles are somewhat similar. There's 3 true interior lineman types, and there's an edge rusher type and whatnot. There's still going to be a nose. Tyler Shelvin's still going to have a role, but I think there's the unknowns are just how do you piece together these different defensive linemen. So, I've heard they actually are interested in the idea of going with 2-2 techniques and going what you were excited for, the Tyler Shelvin.
I've been pushing this idea.
Yeah. I think
put 700 pounds of tackle at the 2 technique, and then you work from there.
And I don't know
especially if you're gonna have brand new linebackers, why not?
That's fun. You can make a nickname for it, make a whole brand, print some shirts. like make a big mass-filled line, gargantuan. But I don't think that's going to be like the full-time front or anything like that. But then Ed Orgeron said on the on 104.5 this morning on Off the Bench that Glenn Logan, Neil Farrell, they're probably more suited to be inside as tackles. Well, now all of a sudden that's 4 starter caliber tackles for again, you don't want to get too bogged down by positions, but most likely for 2 spots. Now last year they basically had 6 starters and rotated all 3 almost every single series, so I think that's ideal. But I'm just wondering how you kind of keep all those guys happy, because that's a lot of talent there. The question marks come at the end spots.
Where's the pass rush come from?
Yes. I think the front runner there, from what I've heard, Ojon said on the radio again this morning, I think TK McClendon, which is a name that would probably surprise some people, is I think a guy they really like there. I mean, he was a junior college tight end who came over last year, spent the whole season flipping over to defensive side, redshirting, and basically kind of not learning because he played it in high school, but really learning how to play defensive line at the SEC level. But you kind of kept hearing like, man, if this guy, he's going to be really good if he gets this down. And I think, he's a freak athlete. He's a tight end type body, so he obviously has that. I'll have a story running on him tomorrow, a little plug there. But
ooh,
I think
prepared.
But yeah, I think that he's somebody who could easily be a front runner for that one of those edge rushing spots. And then but then you still have an Andre Anthony, who is a name people have been hearing for a long time. Is like, well, he could step up, but I think I
believe he was in college when I was in college at this point. Seems like he's been around for a long time.
I know, it's like year 4 of like, this could be Andre Anthony's time. I don't know. But I think he's probably better suited to be a 4-3 DN than he is a 3-4. I think the other responsibilities that came with being an outside linebacker, that's where I think he struggled. So he could be in the mix there. And then on the other side, Justin Thomas is the name that Ogeron dropped this morning. And, he's a guy who was the one pass rushing defensive line in their cheetah package last year, which they're all their best pass rushers were on their 3rd down unit. He's the one defensive lineman they put there. They considered him the best defensive lineman. So I think, some variation of those 6-7 people, that's a pretty strong defensive line. I think the questions really come at linebacker.
Yeah, linebacker, Damone Clark had his moments last year where you feel pretty good about him stepping into one of those spots. The thing I'm almost more curious about is Jacoby Stevens does so many things well.
Yeah.
When you have so many holes in the front and so many capable guys on the back end, is there a temptation there to play him more in kind of a hybrid linebacker role?
Yeah, and I think the temptation has to be there. Let's be honest. We're sometimes lying to ourselves when we kept calling him a safety last year, because I don't have the percentages in front of me, but half of the time he was an outside linebacker.
He was a 3-4 outside linebacker.
They called it a quarter. Exactly. They called him that quarter position, but I once heard Bill Bush basically joke, like, we made up a name to trick him into playing outside linebacker because he didn't want to. And so, does Bo Pelini keep that going? I don't know the answer there. But I don't know if you'll ever see Jacoby Stevens commit to being, because he does. A lot of people have suggested this. He'd be a great 4-3 linebacker. I think he would be. But I always use the Zach Hess parallel when I talk about this. When it's, Zach Hess didn't come back for another year to be a reliever. He came because he wanted to keep being a starter. He wouldn't have come back that way if he knew he was going to go back to the bullpen right away, would be my guess. I don't think Jacoby Stevens was going to come. I think he's a smart guy, very open-minded guy, but I don't think he would have came back to not play his position. So I kind of assume his base will be safety, but I would also assume Pelini probably plays around him a little bit.
In my mind, this defense is going to kind of build around the fact that, one, you have a very deep line, and two, you have probably the best cornerback in the country in Derek Stingley Jr., and then a lot of other pieces in that secondary that can do different things. You mentioned Stevens, Todd Harris, Maurice Hampton. I mean, these are all guys, Kerry Vincent, who have played and done multiple things, and now you kind of build all of them around the idea that you think Stingley can take away a team's best receiver, and then you kind of figure out the rest.
Yeah, because we even mentioned Marcel Brooks. Where does he fit in all this?
That's an interesting one, too. Is he might be the 4-3 D end? Is he?
He doesn't have the weight to do that. He didn't even have the weight to be a 3-4 outside linebacker. And I think that's like one of the first questions we have to ask Ogeron tomorrow is just kind of, hey, where do you see him fitting? I mean, I asked Brooks before the championship game at Media Day, what do you see your role being next year? And he said pretty confidently, I'm going to go back to being a safety, and I'll pass rush on third downs. That's very possible. I don't know. He doesn't seem like the body type to be a traditional linebacker. Doesn't have the weight to be a DN, and maybe we overthink this position stuff sometimes. Maybe Pelini will be more multiple than we think he will, but I have no idea. But to get back to your point, it's fascinating how they have so much depth at safety. You're pretty confident about your corners between Stingley, Flott, Vincent, Jay Ward, Elias Ricks coming in as a 5-star, but linebacker is just so wide open, and that's an area where I think they might look grad transfer for sure. But say they don't get a grad transfer because you can't bank on that, right?
And not every grad transfer comes in and is Joe Burrow or Cole Tracy.
So you can't put your confidence there. So you have Damone Clark in one spot. Who are your other two? Micah Baskerville is certainly going to be in the mix there. He's the guy you can trust. I don't think he's the upside of some of these other guys, but you can trust Micah Baskerville, and people
can go in there and tackle people.
Yeah, and some people in the program said he kind of turned a corner toward the end of the season. But do you start looking? I mean, it's not a position you want to do this often at, but do you really look at some of those true freshmen to come in? I've heard rave reviews about Josh White, the 4-star coming in. And he's an early enrollee too. Maybe he can come in there. Can Antoine Sampa come in and do something? I'm not sure, but that's a lot to ask a freshman at linebacker. But I think that's obviously the big question mark this season, and how you use a guy like Stevens or Brooks might be a big part of that.
A couple minutes left here before we have to hit another break. What is this? Do you think this defense can be as good as last year's defense? Because I think we all understand the offense can't be. The defense, I mean, I know it's way early. You're just basing it on the scheme, the parts, the things we know about. I guess just kind of a similar question how we wrapped up the offense. Ceiling floor situation on this defense.
Yeah, it's a great question because then you have to really be honest with yourself about how good did you think last year's was, right? Because there was a 4-week stretch where you thought the sky was falling with this defense, and there was ended really strong, and it's like, did you consider last year's defense a success? I mean, they won a championship, so yes, but it is kind of a gray area. So when I think of it from that perspective, yeah, I think they can. I mean, I think you have one of the best defensive lines in the SEC. You have one of the better secondaries in the SEC, and you have some questions at linebacker, but I think there's at least possibility this is still a top 5 defense in the SEC. I think the question we're all waiting to see the answer on is Bo Pelini. I mean, he hasn't coached at Power 5 in 6-7 years, and I think we might overthink that sometimes. I'm not saying that as a diss on him, but there's just a lot of question marks there, and he's getting paid $2.3 million a year, so we'll get some answers pretty fast this season of just kind of how much of is there a coaching drop off or is it an improvement? I don't know the answer, but I'm really curious there.
Unnamed user in the huddle says having Shelvin and Ika in the middle would be similar to the early Ravens line with Sam Adams and Tony Siragusa. That would be great. That's a great comparison. I prefer the one I used maybe a month ago with what was it? John Henderson and Marcus Stroud on the old Ravens, maybe in the 2003, 2004, sometime in there.
Jaguars, right?
Jaguars, that's right. He put Ravens in my head, and
I got you.
It got there. Anyway.
And they bring some personality. That's key. If you got a big guy who needs some personality, Ika brings personality. Shelvin's got a little.
I'll never forget the media day before the national championship game. Apu Ika, he just wandered around with a cane and sunglasses on. And
he was wearing a hoodie with the sunglasses, correct?
Yeah, it was. It just screamed that he has personality. He seems like an odd dude. We've heard about him. Yeah. He loves to sing in the weight room.
Yes.
That kind of stuff.
Two different players said, "Oh, you guys will like Apu. His personality's like Joe Burrow." So are we talking a 350-pound Joe Burrow? What does that even look like? What does that entail? I have a lot of questions. Hopefully we get to talk to him soon.